For more than 1,000 years, the greatest walls ever built had never once been broken. In the spring of the year 1453, the triple walls of Constantinople still stood exactly as they had for 10 centuries. Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Vikings, and countless armies had thrown themselves against that stone, and every single one of them had failed. The walls were so thick, so tall, and so cleverly layered that they had passed out of the world of engineering and into the world of legend. The people who lived behind them, the last citizens of the Roman Empire, believed those walls would stand until the end of time. Then the Ottomans arrived with something the world had never seen before. It was a cannon so enormous that it had taken 60 oxen and more than 200 men to drag it into position. Its bronze barrel stretched more than 25 feet from end to end. Its mouth was wide enough to swallow a stone ball weighing over half a ton. When the gunners lit the fuse, the roar was said to carry for more than 10 miles across the countryside. Birds fell from the sky, the earth trembled, and a single stone ball came screaming across the open ground and slammed into walls that had stood since the days of ancient Rome. And the walls cracked. For 55 days, the great gun and its smaller companions pounded the defences without mercy. And on the 29th of May in the year 1453, the impossible finally happened. The walls of Constantinople came apart. The attackers poured through the broken stone, and the Roman Empire, which had endured in one form or another for nearly 1,500 years, died in a single morning, buried under a storm of rubble and smoke. The weapon that ended a 1,000-year empire was gunpowder. But here is the strange, almost unbelievable truth hidden at the very center of this story. The black powder that shattered those ancient walls, that would soon end the age of the armored knight, and the stone castle that would eventually kill more human beings than any other invention in history, was never meant to be a weapon at all. It was created by holy men, by quiet, patient scholars in the mountains of ancient China, and they were not searching for a way to take life. They were searching for the exact opposite. They spent their entire lives trying to brew a magical potion that would allow a human being to live forever. They were hunting for the secret of eternal life. And instead, they invented mass death. This is the history of gunpowder. That was 1453. But the true beginning of this story lies more than 600 years earlier, and thousands of miles to the east, in the temples and mountain workshops of ancient China. During the Tang Dynasty, which ruled China from the 7th century into the 10th, there existed a class of scholars we would today call alchemists. In China, they were often connected to the Taoist religious tradition, and they were obsessed with a single glorious idea. They believed that somewhere in the right combination of natural substances lay the recipe for an elixir of immortality, a medicine that could cure aging, defeat sickness, and grant eternal life. These were not fools. They were among the most educated and disciplined people of their age. They spent decades grinding, heating, mixing, and testing minerals and herbs in search of the perfect formula. They kept careful written records, and along the way, almost by accident, they became some of the finest experimental chemists the ancient world ever produced. One of the substances they were endlessly fascinated by was a strange, salty white crystal that formed naturally on the ground in certain caves and along the edges of farm fields. Today we call it saltpeter or potassium nitrate. To the alchemists it seemed almost magical. When heated, it did unusual and dramatic things. They believed a substance so powerful must surely hold some of the secrets of life itself. So they experimented with it. They combined saltpeter with sulfur, another mineral they prized, and with ordinary charcoal. And at some point, in some workshop whose exact name and date are lost to history, someone brought a flame too close to the mixture. The result was not eternal life. The result was fire that seemed to explode out of nowhere. We actually have a written warning about this from around the middle of the 9th century. In a Taoist text meant to guide alchemists in their sacred work, an author cautions his readers about a specific, dangerous formula. He describes how some practitioners had mixed saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal together, and how the mixture had burst into violent flame, burning the hands and faces of the men who made it, and in some cases burning down the entire building around them. Think about how remarkable that is. The oldest surviving description of gunpowder in human history is not a weapons manual. It is a safety warning written inside a book about how to achieve immortality. The Chinese even named the substance in a way that reveals its origins. They called it huo yao, which translates, quite literally, as fire medicine. For a time, they genuinely thought of this explosive powder as a kind of drug. The men who wanted to live forever had discovered one of the most efficient ways ever found to die. For a while, that might have been the end of it. A dangerous curiosity, a warning passed between scholars. But China in these centuries was not a peaceful place. It was a land of rival kingdoms, restless frontiers, and constant military pressure. And it did not take long for someone to look at this fire medicine and ask a very different question. Not, can this grant eternal life, but can this help me win a war? The answer, it turned out, was yes. By the time of the Song Dynasty, which followed the Tang, gunpowder had begun its long transformation from failed medicine into weapon of war. And we can watch it happen in the written record. In the year 1044, a massive military encyclopedia was compiled for the Chinese court. Among its thousands of entries, it contains something extraordinary: 3 separate written recipes for gunpowder, along with instructions for how to use it in battle. These early formulas were not yet the explosive powder that would later shatter castle walls. The balance of ingredients was still crude, and the mixture tended to burn fiercely rather than detonate. But it was enough. Chinese engineers began strapping packets of the powder to arrows, creating fire arrows that could rain flame down onto enemy formations and wooden fortifications. They packed it into simple bombs that could be hurled by catapult. Then came a true turning point: the invention of the fire lance. The fire lance was, in a sense, the ancestor of every gun that would ever be made. It began as a simple tube, often made of bamboo and later of metal, attached to the end of a spear. The tube was packed with gunpowder. When lit, it shot out a roaring jet of flame, sparks, and sometimes bits of pottery, sand, or metal fragments, blasting them directly into the face of an enemy at close range. We have records of these weapons being used in siege warfare in the early 12th century, including the defense of a besieged city in the year 1132. At first, the fire lance was a one-time terror weapon, but Chinese engineers kept refining it. They made the barrels stronger, they increased the charge, and slowly they realized something profound. If you placed a single projectile inside the barrel and let the exploding powder push it out, you could send that projectile flying with tremendous force. The flame-throwing tube was becoming a gun. Meanwhile, the bombs were getting deadlier too. Chinese and neighboring armies developed explosive devices with hard iron casings packed with gunpowder that produced not just fire, but a genuine shattering blast. One of these was so loud and violent it was given a name that translates as the heaven-shaking thunder crash bomb. When it went off, contemporaries wrote that the sound could be heard for miles, and that the iron casing could tear through armor as if it were paper. During the great sieges of the 13th century, as the Mongols swept across Asia, both sides hurled these thundering bombs at one another across the walls. And then, sometime in the 13th century, gunpowder crossed the final threshold. Somebody cast a barrel entirely out of metal, sealed one end, loaded it with powder and a projectile, and created the first true hand cannon. One of the oldest surviving examples ever found is a small bronze gun dated to around the year 1288. It is heavy, simple, and unmistakably a firearm. Nearly 800 years later, you would still recognize it for exactly what it is. The fire medicine of the immortality seekers had become the deadliest tool of war on Earth, and it was about to leave China and change the entire world. The great carriers of that change were the Mongols. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire exploded outward from the steppes to become the largest connected land empire in human history, stretching from the Pacific coast of Asia all the way to the gates of Europe. The Mongols were ferocious students of warfare, and wherever they conquered, they absorbed the best technologies they found. And gunpowder was among the greatest prizes they encountered in China. As Mongol armies pushed westward, and as merchants and travelers moved along the vast trade routes the Mongols now controlled, the secret of the fire medicine traveled with them. It passed into the Islamic world, where scholars and engineers began recording their own formulas and building their own weapons, and from there it seeped into Europe. By the second half of the 13th century, knowledge of gunpowder had reached European hands. An English scholar and friar, writing around the year 1267, recorded a recipe for an explosive powder, though he was so alarmed by its potential that he deliberately hid part of the formula in a coded riddle. In the popular imagination of later centuries, Europeans would even invent a legend crediting the invention to a German monk. It was not true, of course, but it is telling that Europe too remembered gunpowder as something born in the hands of holy men. By the early 14th century, the first European cannons appear. An English manuscript from the year 1326 contains one of the earliest known European illustrations of a cannon, a strange vase-shaped device firing a giant arrow. These first guns were small, unreliable, and often more dangerous to their crews than to the enemy. When cannons appeared at a famous battle in the year 1346, they caused far more noise than damage. But the trajectory was set. For the next 100 years, European rulers and engineers poured money and ingenuity into their guns, making them bigger, stronger, and more accurate. And as the cannons grew, they began to threaten something that had defined warfare and society itself for more than 1,000 years: the castle and the knight. To understand why gunpowder changed everything, you have to understand the world it destroyed. For roughly 1,000 years across medieval Europe and much of the world, military power rested on two foundations: the stone fortress and the armored warrior. A well-built castle was, for all practical purposes, unconquerable by direct assault. Attackers could try to climb the walls and be slaughtered. They could try to starve the defenders out over months or even years. But the walls themselves, thick sheets of solid stone, simply could not be broken by human muscle. A small number of defenders behind good walls could hold off an army many times their size, and the armoured knight was the castle's living equivalent. Encased head to toe in steel plate, mounted on a powerful warhorse, a knight was nearly invulnerable to the weapons of ordinary foot soldiers. Training one took a lifetime, equipping one cost a fortune. This is why medieval society was shaped the way it was, a small warrior aristocracy holding land and power, living in fortresses, dominating everyone below them. The castle and the knight were not just weapons. They were the physical foundation of an entire social order. Gunpowder erased both of them in less than a century. We already saw what happened at Constantinople in 1453, when Ottoman bombards smashed through walls that had defied the world for 1,000 years. But that same year, on the other side of Europe, gunpowder delivered a second devastating verdict. In a battle fought in the year 1453, French forces armed with a powerful, well-organized train of artillery destroyed an English army and brought the long and bloody conflict known as the 100 Years' War to an end. The lesson was unmistakable, and it echoed across the continent. Cannon now decided the fate of kingdoms. The message became even louder in the year 1494, when a French king marched into Italy with something that stunned every observer: a train of mobile bronze cannons cast to a standard design, mounted on wheeled carriages and pulled by horses so they could keep pace with the army. Italian fortresses that had expected to hold out for months fell in days, sometimes in hours. Walls that had protected cities for generations crumbled almost as soon as the guns opened fire. Contemporaries described it as a kind of horror, as if warfare itself had been rewritten overnight. And on the open battlefield, the proud armoured knight was meeting the same fate. Handheld firearms had arrived, the arquebus, and later the musket. These early guns were slow, clumsy, and inaccurate, but they had one terrible advantage. A peasant with a few weeks of training could fire a lead ball straight through the finest, most expensive plate armor ever forged. In the year 1525, at a great battle in northern Italy, ranks of Spanish gunmen shattered the flower of the French heavy cavalry and even captured the French king himself. The knight, the invincible steel warrior who had ruled the battlefield for 1,000 years, had been rendered obsolete by a weapon a commoner could hold in two hands. Stop and consider what this actually meant. For 1,000 years, war had favoured the few, the wealthy, the noble, the men who could afford castles and armour. Gunpowder handed that power to the many. A line of ordinary soldiers with guns could bring down the greatest knight in the world. A cannon paid for by a king could flatten the proudest baron's fortress. The whole logic of medieval society, its castles, its aristocracy, its scattered feudal lords, began to collapse. And in its place rose a new kind of power, the large, centralized state, rich enough to build artillery and pay for armies of gunmen. The modern nation itself was in part forged in gunpowder smoke. Before we continue, let me take one quick moment. If you are enjoying this story so far, please take a second to subscribe to Arsenal of Empires. This channel is devoted entirely to the weapons and the technologies that built and destroyed the great empires of history, the tools that quietly rewrote the fate of the world. Subscribing truly makes a difference for a growing channel like this one, and it means you will not miss what comes next. Now let us return to the story, because gunpowder was only just getting started. By the 16th century, gunpowder had stopped being a shocking novelty and had become the beating heart of warfare across much of the world. Historians sometimes describe the changes that followed as a military revolution, and the phrase is well earned. Everything about how humans organized violence was being rebuilt around the gun. Armies changed. Instead of small bands of elite warriors, states now fielded large formations of drilled infantry carrying firearms supported by ranks of artillery. Training shifted from individual skill to collective discipline, teaching hundreds of men to load, aim, and fire in coordinated waves so that even as some reloaded, others kept up a steady storm of lead. War became a matter of organization, supply, and industry as much as courage. Fortresses changed too. The tall, thin, majestic stone walls of the medieval castle had been perfect for stopping ladders and battering rams, but they simply shattered under cannon fire. So engineers invented an entirely new kind of fortress, low, thick, sloped walls of earth and brick, designed to absorb and deflect cannonballs, laid out in geometric star shapes so that defending guns could sweep every possible angle of attack. These star forts spread out from Italy across the entire world, and their descendants can still be seen today from Europe to the Americas to Asia. And empires changed. Some of the most powerful states of this era rose to greatness on the strength of their guns, so much so that historians have given them a shared name, the Gunpowder Empires. Vast realms across the Middle East and South Asia used massed cannon and firearms to conquer enormous territories and hold them together. In the same centuries, European powers bolted heavy cannons onto sailing ships and used that floating firepower to project their strength across every ocean on Earth, building trading posts, colonies, and empires on distant continents. The map of the entire modern world to which peoples ruled, which lands, which languages are spoken where today, was drawn in no small part by who controlled the best gunpowder weapons and who did not. For all this world-shaking power, though, gunpowder itself remained a surprisingly primitive substance for a very long time. The basic recipe, saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, barely changed for roughly 600 years. Gunners learned tricks to improve it, such as a process that pressed the powder into small, uniform grains so it would burn more evenly and reliably. But the fundamental chemistry stayed the same, generation after generation. And getting the ingredients was a grim, exhausting business, especially the saltpeter. This precious crystal did not exist in large natural deposits in most of Europe, so it had to be manufactured, and the methods were as unpleasant as they were ingenious. Specialized workers, sometimes called saltpeter men, would collect the richest source of the chemical they could find, the waste of animals and humans. They built great heaps of manure, soil, ash, and urine, tended them for months or years, and then leached out the saltpeter crystals that formed within. In some countries, these saltpeter gatherers were granted the legal right to dig up the floors of private barns, stables, and even homes in search of the nitrate-rich earth. Empires quite literally ran on the contents of their own cesspits. The powder that decided the fate of nations began its life in filth. For centuries, this old black powder was all the world had. It was smoky, it was dirty, and it left a thick fog hanging over every battlefield. And then, in the 19th century, chemistry finally caught up with gunpowder and made it far, far more terrible. In the year 1847, an Italian chemist created a new substance by treating glycerin with powerful acids. The result was a clear, oily liquid of almost unimaginable explosive violence, nitroglycerin. It was vastly more powerful than black powder. It was also wildly, insanely unstable. The smallest shock, a bump, a jolt, a change in temperature could set it off without warning. It killed so many people so unpredictably that many considered it far too dangerous to ever use. Then a Swedish inventor took up the challenge of taming it. After years of dangerous experiments that killed several people, including his own younger brother, he discovered that if you soaked the deadly liquid into a certain kind of absorbent earth, you could handle it safely and detonate it on command. In the year 1867, he patented his invention and gave it a name drawn from the ancient Greek word for power. He called it dynamite. This same inventor went further still, helping to develop a new generation of smokeless powders to finally replace the old black powder that had ruled for 6 centuries. Around the 1880s, chemists in France and elsewhere perfected propellants that burned cleaner, hit harder, and left almost no smoke, allowing soldiers to fire again and again without vanishing behind a wall of fog. The age of black powder was ending. The age of high explosives had begun. There is a bitter, unforgettable irony in how this chapter closes. The Swedish inventor of dynamite grew fabulously wealthy from his explosives, which were sold around the world for mining, construction, and war. Late in his life, a French newspaper mistakenly published his obituary while he was still alive, and it condemned him as a merchant of death who had grown rich by finding new ways to kill people faster than ever before. He read in print how the world would remember him, and it horrified him. So in his final years, he rewrote his will. He left the enormous fortune he had built from explosives to fund a set of annual prizes celebrating the greatest achievements of humankind in science, in literature, and above all, in the pursuit of peace. His name is Alfred Nobel. And the Nobel Prizes, including the Nobel Peace Prize, are funded to this day by a fortune built on explosives. The man who gave the world some of its most destructive tools tried at the very end to buy back his soul, but the explosives he helped unleash could not be called back. In the early 20th century, all of this chemistry and industry and organization came together in the most catastrophic way imaginable. When the First World War erupted, the descendants of the fire medicine reached their terrible maturity. Massed artillery firing high explosive shells turned entire landscapes into cratered wastelands. Along the trenches of that war, the greatest killer was not the rifle or the bayonet, but the shell, the industrialized descendant of Chinese gunpowder raining down by the millions. In single battles, more shells were fired in a matter of days than had existed in the entire medieval world. The gentle scholars who first mixed saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal in search of eternal life could never, in their wildest nightmares, have imagined where their fire medicine would lead. So let us step back and look at the whole astonishing arc of this story. Gunpowder is remembered in China as one of the 4 great inventions of its civilization, alongside the compass, papermaking, and printing. and of those four, none reshaped the world as violently or as completely as this one. A substance discovered by holy men chasing immortality became the tool that ended 1,000 years of castles and knights. It shattered the old feudal order and helped give birth to the modern centralized state. It allowed a handful of nations to sail across the oceans and build empires that spanned the globe. It redrew the borders of the world, decided which languages we speak and which flags fly over which lands, and finally, in the 20th century, it made possible destruction on a scale humanity had never before witnessed. From a burned alchemist's workshop in ancient China to the walls of Constantinople crumbling into dust, to the muddy shell craters of the First World War, one thread runs through it all, a powder invented in the search for endless life, which instead became the most efficient engine of death the world had ever known. They were looking for a way to live forever, and in the end, they changed forever what it means to die. That is the history of gunpowder. If you have not yet subscribed to Arsenal of Empires, please subscribe now and help this channel grow. It genuinely makes a huge difference. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like so more people can discover it, and leave a comment telling us which weapon you would like to see in the next video. From the powder that ended the age of castles, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one, here on Arsenal of Empires.